Senator Ted Cruz, how are you, sir?
Mark, I'm doing terrific. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I mean, the country's gone to hell, but I personally am doing very well, thank you.
Well, I hope you had a good 4th of July and celebrated our nation's independence.
Oh, yes. Yes, I did, thank you. And same there. Before we get into the border and some of that's going on, I wanted to ask you a question.
Sure.
This Mississippi race has a lot of people very, very upset with the tactics that were used and so forth. I have not heard if you have a take on that or not.
Well, what happened in Mississippi was appalling. Primaries are always rough and tumble, but the conduct of the Washington, D.C. machine in the Mississippi runoff was incredibly disappointing. In that race, we know some things, and then there are even more serious allegations that have been raised. What we know at the outset is that Chris McDaniel won a sizable majority of the votes from Republicans who voted in the runoff. But the D.C. machine spent hundreds of thousands of dollars urging some 30 to 40,000 partisan Democrats to vote in the runoff, which changed the outcome. And, all of us want to grow the party. But what the D.C. machine did was not try to grow the party. Instead, the ads they ran were racially charged, false attacks, and they were explicit promises to continue and expand the welfare state. And nobody has suggested that the Democrats who voted in the primary will actually vote Republican in the general election. Instead, they were just recruited to decide who the Republican nominee was. And that's unprincipled and it's wrong. But even more troubling, Mark, in the past week or so, we have seen serious allegations of voter fraud. And I very much hope that no Republican was involved in voter fraud. But these allegations need to be vigorously investigated, and anyone involved in criminal conduct should be prosecuted. The voters of Mississippi deserve to know the truth.
Well, the technical issue here. We're having a little trouble with your phone. I think what you said was right on, by the way. We're going to hang up. Can you call us back, Senator?
Sure.
All right. We'll keep the line clear. Senator Ted Cruz, I thought that was a very important statement he just made. And I'm sure the establishment in Washington will be upset, but what he said is very important. That he's very concerned about the manner in which Washington Republicans and their consultants were involved in this race, the way they use their money. I'm not putting words in his mouth. I'm just summing up the race-based allegations against the opponent in the Tea Party. And he's called for a full investigation of any potential fraud and that people should be brought to justice if they violated the law. Now, he's one of the few, if not the only, senator that I've heard say this so far. I mean, they should all be saying this, should they not? And yet they're not all saying this. I've heard almost nothing. In fact, I heard John McCain celebrate the way Thad Cochran ran and won, which is really stunning to me. Mitch McConnell, behind the scenes, was, doing his high fives because he was one of the architects of this. The National Republican Senatorial Committee, this is a committee set up by Republican incumbents. It's really led by McConnell. His figurehead there is this guy Moran from Kansas. So, Ted Cruz, Senator, you want a full and vigorous investigation of these fraud allegations, correct?
It is the only responsible thing to do. There have been serious allegations raised, and it is my hope that there are no Republicans involved in it. I think it would be abominable if Republicans were involved in voter fraud. And I think the only fair thing to do for the voters of Mississippi and for the integrity of the election is to investigate the allegations seriously and then to prosecute anyone who was involved in criminal conduct.
Mm-hmm. We don't have you for long. I want to turn to the border. We have absolute anarchy on the border, the southern border, and that certainly includes Texas. You have a Democrat congressman there who is complaining that the administration should have been prepared for this. You have others saying the administration was tipped off to the likelihood of this. And, of course, Obama's comments are very provocative throughout the years, and his imperial actions with respect to so-called dreamers and so forth. I think the message is out. If you want to get in here now, and the sooner the better.
Mark, you're exactly right. What we are seeing is a tragic, heartbreaking circumstance, and it's a humanitarian crisis. That's the one thing President Obama is right about, is that what is happening to these children is a humanitarian crisis, but it is a crisis of his own creation. It is the direct consequence of President Obama's lawlessness. Just 3 years ago, in 2011, the number of unaccompanied children who were apprehended at the border was roughly 6,000. But then in 2012, right before the election, President Obama illegally granted amnesty to some 800,000 people who were here illegally who entered as children. And as a direct consequence of that illegal amnesty, the number of unaccompanied children skyrocketed. So by this year, the estimate is there will be 90,000 unaccompanied children apprehended. That's up from 6,000 just 3 years ago. Next year, it's estimated to be 145,000. And Mark, what's really critical to understand is the human tragedy that is playing out before us. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was down in Lackland Air Force Base, which is where some 1,200 of these kids are being housed. And these are little boys and little girls that are being handed over not to well-meaning social workers, but to hardened transnational global criminal cartels who are physically assaulting these kids, who are sexually assaulting these kids. It is horrific, and it's the direct consequence of the president's lawlessness.
Well, the problem we have now, Senator, this checks and balances, the separation of powers, I mean, he's done enormous damage to our constitutional system. This seems to be part of his agenda, and he intends to do more if you listen to what he says, and I know you do. And so if the House, in particular with these tax bills, isn't going to take steps to try and control what's going on with this president, I don't know how we stop this.
Well, the lawlessness from the president is stunning, and it cuts across virtually every area of the government, from immigration law to welfare law, to drug law, to marriage law, to Obamacare. We have never seen a president in our nation's history who, if he disagrees with a particular law, simply refuses to enforce it, refuses to defend it, refuses to uphold it or obey it. And this ought to be an issue, Mark, that dismays anybody, whether they're Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, forget party. If you've got a president that's picking and choosing which laws to follow, which laws to ignore, that undermines the basic checks and balances of our Constitution. And you're right that Congress needs to be much, much more vigorous in reining in President Obama. The House has been trying. I wish they were more effective. One of the things the House needs to do is appoint a select committee to investigate the abuses of the IRS. They've done so for Benghazi. We need another one for the IRS. And the Senate right now, Harry Reid is Barack Obama's most important protector. Harry Reid shuts down the Senate, prevents any meaningful oversight, which means Harry Reid is the president's enabler. When the president ignores the law and ignores the Constitution, Harry Reid, the Senate Democrats, stand up and cheer, and that is profoundly dangerous to our liberty.
Did you ever think you'd see the day when a Senate Majority Leader would basically eviscerate the rules of the Senate and change the traditions of the Senate to accommodate a president? I can't even imagine Robert Byrd doing such a thing.
You're exactly right. And President Obama is not the first president who's tried to abuse his power. Other presidents have tried to abuse their power, have abused their power. No one has done so with such breathtaking expanse as President Obama has. But one of the things that is really stunningly different is every time in the past presidents have abused their power, senators from their own party have stood up and called them to account, have defended the prerogatives of the Senate, have defended the Constitution, have defended rule of law. When Richard Nixon abused his power, when Richard Nixon tried to use the IRS to target his political enemies, Republicans rightly called him to account and decried him for it. That was the right thing to do. It was the principled thing to do. No president should abuse his power that way. What's different now is when President Obama openly scoffs at the laws on the book. When President Obama and the Obama administration not only tried, but the Obama administration succeeded in using the IRS to target his political enemies. Nixon never succeeded, but Obama did. Not a single Democratic senator, not one, is willing to stand up to President Obama and call him to account. That is unprecedented, to have senators who simply roll over and acquiesce in the usurpation of power from the executive and the undermining of the rule of law.
I just feel the House needs to take steps to use the power of the purse more effectively. I know you're in the other body. And to begin at least the effort to defund and let the Senate do what the Senate will or won't do, but they really ought to stand up for their constitutional prerogatives, whatever the outcome.
You are exactly right, and the House is in the position to lead. Now, I'll commend the House. They have led on Benghazi, appointing a select committee on Benghazi. I wish it had been appointed a year ago, but I'm glad that they appointed it. It should be a joint select committee. If the Senate were actually doing our job, we would both do this together, and I introduced a year ago a resolution for this to be a joint select committee. 24 senators have co-sponsored it, but Harry Reid is blocking it. They need to do the same thing on the IRS, and I'll tell you one thing the House could do right now. 2 weeks ago, I gave an extended floor speech on the Senate floor talking about the abuse of power of the IRS and Eric Holder's absolute contempt for rule of law. Now, Mark, you and I are both alums of the Department of Justice, and both of us respect and even revere the role that the Department of Justice has played upholding rule of law and standing up to partisan pressure from presidents of both parties. We've never seen as partisan an attorney general as Eric Holder, who refuses to fairly investigate the IRS abuse of power. And 2 weeks ago on the Senate floor, what I called for is that if Eric Holder will not appoint a special prosecutor with meaningful independence to investigate the IRS abuse of power, and a special prosecutor who is not, at a minimum, a major Obama donor, which is what the current lawyer leading the DOJ investigation is, that the House of Representatives should impeach Eric Holder. That's something the House can do right now using its constitutional authority to say an attorney general who covers up and aids and abets the abuse of power is no longer fit to serve as attorney general.
Ted Cruz, can I impose on you for a few more minutes after the break? I want to ask you about this Palestinian Hamas government and why we don't defund that. All right, we'll be right back with Senator Ted Cruz. Read an excellent op-ed you wrote, I believe it was the Jerusalem Post site, on this hybrid, this government, this Palestinian Hamas, Abbas, technical, gradual government, whatever phony name they're giving to it. And I think you made the point, look, this Hamas is a terrorist group. They're part of a government. We ought to stop funding this. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, Mark, that's exactly right. Hamas are open terrorists. Just in the last few weeks, they kidnapped 3 teenage boys in Israel who were waiting at the bus stop. The 2 of them were high school students. 1 of them was an American citizen. They kidnapped them, and then they murdered them simply because they were innocent Jewish teenagers. This is the act of violent terrorists, and sadly, the Palestinian Authority has now formed a so-called unity government with Hamas, with this open terrorist group. And this is a group that has carried out repeatedly terrorist attacks. Just today, Hamas is responsible for launching, it's reported, roughly 80 rockets into Israel designed to murder innocent civilians. This is now part of the government of the Palestinian Authority. And in my view, the United States should not send a single penny to any unity government that has Hamas as a part of it. We shouldn't be sending U.S. taxpayer dollars to fund terrorists.
And you know what concerns me? I wonder if you actually proposed that on the Senate floor, whether you'd even get a majority of senators to join you. Do you think you would?
Well, I think if we had a vote on it, we probably would get a majority of senators, which is precisely why Harry Reid in all likelihood would prevent a vote. Much of what Harry Reid does over and over again is prevent votes on anything that would put even the tiniest bit of scrutiny on the Obama administration. I'll give an example. We've got a bipartisan supermajority on the Kirk-Menendez-Iran sanctions bill that stands up to President Obama's ill-advised deal with Iran that I think is only facilitating their move to develop nuclear weapons capability. Harry Reid will not allow a vote on Iran sanctions. The only reason it hasn't passed the Senate is because Harry Reid blocks a vote. And so I think in the instance you and I are talking about, Harry Reid would be extremely unlikely to allow a vote on blocking funding to the Palestinian Authority because he doesn't want to oppose the Obama administration, and the Obama administration is unwilling to stand up to it radical Islamic terrorists effectively. Instead, their response more often than not is to criticize and harangue the nation of Israel.
Which is very strange, isn't it? I mean, you have a Palestinian who was killed over there. The Israelis round up 6 people. They're interrogating them. They intend to bring them to justice. Meanwhile, on the other side, you have these 3 Israeli kids who are murdered. And the White House puts out a very cold statement. Ted, I hate to do this. I wasn't watching the clock properly. I want to thank you for coming. I want you to come back. We'll discuss more of these things. And I want to, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mark. God bless.
All right. That's Senator Ted Cruz. Fortunately, I wasn't watching the clock properly. I find it very problematic, the way this administration responds to what goes on in Israel. They treat this Hamas terrorist organization on a par with the Israeli government. It troubles me enormously. There you have it. Senator Ted Cruz, among other things, criticizing what took place in Mississippi. I hadn't heard that before. I think that's a first on this program.